listening to The Big Lift, the podcast of Webtrends Optimize, the CRO solution that enables marketers and developers to maximize the ROI on their digital properties. Webtrends Optimize is a powerful, feature-rich and easy-to-use solution, all delivered within a fixed-price contract with no additional cost for increased functionality ever. During these podcasts, we meet some of the key influencers within the marketing and conversion world to understand their roles and examine their challenges. Today, I'm chatting with Paul Stephenson, founder and sales performance expert at EgoStream. Paul has over 2 decades of working with technology companies to help drive sustainable quarter-on-quarter growth. Recently, Paul has been working with us here at Webtrends Optimize. During this podcast, he shares his unique perspective on our business looking from the outside in. Paul, could you explain a little about what EgoStream does and how you work with companies such as ourselves?
Yes, good question, John. EgoStream is a professional services business that has a heritage of 25 years working with the technology industry predominantly at helping tech companies grow. We offer a number of services, particularly around sales scale and working with venture-backed organizations, pre- and post-investment, predominantly to help them drive sales growth within their set markets. So we have a deep heritage, a very successful track record, small niche business, a caring business who, fundamentally enjoy what we do. So we really do sort of work with, software companies, e-commerce businesses, service-led businesses, etc. And, overall, very much tech-centric professional services company.
And why the focus on tech?
Well, I think obviously it's high growth. It's been a very sustainable industry sector for us over the last sort of 25 years. Very enjoyable, very dynamic. Yeah, it's good fun and high-paced. I think in the early years we were very much working with American companies coming into the UK European market. So we're helping them set up, get established with a footprint, helping them scale sales. Working from the plan point of view and then getting involved with implementing the processes and then developing the people to implement those processes to drive growth. About 10 years ago, diversified and looked into predominantly working with founder-led, entrepreneur-led organizations, British, call them mid-market, SME. And then latterly over the last 6 or 7 years worked with a lot of business that have been driving growth from $1 million turnover to 5 million and upwards. Very pleasurable end of the market because you can affect value. I think the corporate end, it's enjoyable but not as. So we tend to specialize in founder-led organizations, private, that are looking for high added value professional services around scaling sales and growing their business.
And what was the reason that you moved from being US kind of centric to being UK centric? Is there a larger growth of new tech businesses in the UK that you're following?
Yes, I think it's a really good question, actually. I think one of the deciding factors was personal. I think it was, being valued. I felt that the corporate system was, dare I say it, high ego, didn't really sort of truly value what you did. You were paid well, being candid, but bottom line is it was that sort of recognition and that fulfillment. And I think I found that once we started to sort of have dialogue with British entrepreneurs and engage where you were appreciated and you could really affect value and you had a voice within the business, I think that was more favourable from a style perspective. And I think also the dot-com, going back a few years now, but when the dot-com crash came along, that really did realign us a little bit in our thinking as well. A lot of the American businesses that were historically setting up were stopping that. They weren't expanding, they weren't growing, which meant that, I suppose by default, we started to just look for business and by accident and design sort of stumbled across sort of founder-led British tech businesses that needed help. So very pleasurable working with, heartfelt, purpose-driven business strategies where They wanted to engage with a business like ourselves to add that value that they desperately needed to actually reach more of their market. So I think, to answer the question honestly, I think it's personal. I think you just get more satisfaction for seeing the business grow and the teams flourish. So that's that recognition. I think that's pretty much what decided that.
Looking on your website, EgoStream has a very impressive track record and dozens of testimonials that are out there. Does that experience help you to ascertain which businesses will grow and succeed and ultimately determine who you engage with?
Absolutely. I think, like all things, as you become time served within your industry and you become an expert in what you do and deliver and achieve for businesses, there's certain patterns and things that you, I think, instinctively look for when engaging with clients and new clients. And I adopt the policy of we work with, not for. And I think that's very, very important for all businesses to work with each other. And I think we are coming away from that egocentric trading economy now and becoming more collaborative and engaging from a partner point of view. And we tend to endorse that as part of our methodology of developing, high ego sales teams to become more totally customer centric. We do look for certain benchmarks and insights of, the ethos of the business, the leadership, their styles, their commitment. It's not just about the revenue and it's not just about the technology. It's about lots of human factors as well. So being honest, we like to do business with people we like. I think that says it all, really.
So that begs the next question is, what would stop you from working for a business?
I think, businesses bring EgoStream in for advice or help. And if they don't listen, obviously we've, got deep heritage, got a lot of experience of what works and equally what doesn't work. And I think that you can detect in the early days of conversations with individuals that if they're not listening appropriately or you're not engaging at the right levels from an added value point of view, it's pointless. So we tend to sort of try and steer clear of allowing organizations to invest their money knowing for a fact they're not going to get the value from it. And it's very important to sort of have those sort of emotional ties at the outset. So, typical examples of that is ambition and ability is a very good one. I think you get a lot of entrepreneurs in the British, particularly owner-managed area of the market, over-ambitious and have limited ability. And I think becoming totally revenue-driven is just not a healthy thing. And maybe sort of, the pace of... So, for example, if a business has been recently invested in from a venture capitalist and it's not aligned appropriately to its market, you just can see the gap coming. And that's another thing I think is very important because we work at board level. We have a policy that, if you've got a dysfunctional board of directors or you've got a lot of aggression in the boardroom, let's use that, then we tend to try and steer clear.
You use the phrase over-ambitious. I'd like to kind of understand what's the difference between over-ambitious and passionate in your words.
Yeah, that's really good. I think, I have a view that the successful organizations that we have worked with over the years have had a considered, trajectory of growth over good timelines. So they haven't been over hedonistic about numbers. Because you've also got to think about these businesses are made up of people. And I think sometimes if you get your numbers, you're over ambitious within your market, you can mismanage your own expectations. I'm talking about boards of directors here. But equally, you can very quickly distress your business model or stress it to distress and start to burn people out and sort of, start to drive results that nobody wants at the end of the day. So I think that taking that considered approach over good structured timelines is very, very important. And if obviously that's not applicable and, people are sort of, hell bent on getting their own way with the numbers, then the long and short of it is that, there's a high probability it's not going to be sustainable. Because I think from looking at it from an investor's perspective, there's nothing better than good, strong, structured, quarter-on-quarter growth, sustainable results, but not at any price. not burning the business out, not having an autocratic leadership style. I'm just not into that because there is life beyond the spreadsheet. And that's one of our codes of engagement is human factors, very important.
Moving on to our own relationship, what was it that excited you about what we do and convinced you that we should work together?
You know, it was interesting, this question, because I remember my very first conversation with Matt Smith, the chief executive here. And firstly, I think because he was north of the border helped. So we'll kick that in. But it was just, you could hear the dedication in his voice. And I was in the car. I can remember exactly where I was. I was coming through Bournemouth, actually. And I was just coming around the roundabout, and I think I'd reached out to him in a marketing campaign, invited him to one of my dinner events, but he was good enough to actually respond back. And we had a quick chat, and you could tell there was a lot of passion and depth in his voice about what he was looking to achieve. And, you know, from my point of view, I was going through a business discovery process at that stage. But, you know, he was just a nice guy that kind of was on point with what he wanted to do. And he gave me the history of the business, about where the business had been and how he'd managed with his top team to pull it out and set it up, and what his purpose was in the business. And I think all of those sort of things struck very quick for me, and then, you know, in turn, I turned around and said, well, I think next steps for us, Matt, is to get together. And he said, how you fixed Friday? So, you know, there was a sense of urgency about him as well, which was really good. You could just feel the dedication from the get-go, and you just think, wow, this is interesting. But at that point, you also, when you put the phone down, you assess and thinking, is this real? Because you don't meet guys like this every day. And I you know, it was just fresh. And then obviously I met up with them the following Friday. I remember it really well, and I met the top team. You know, I met his head of operations and technical, and it was just a great setup.
You have a unique viewpoint on our business because you're basically outside.
Sure.
And although you're connected to the inside, without looking to get self-praise, could you explain what you saw in our business, or what you see in our business, I should say, and things that we should be talking to our customers and prospects about more?
I think one of the things that really attracted me, coming back to that conversation on the roundabout with Matt, was actually lived up in the first meeting that when we met over at Goodwood, was the dedication. And the term I'll use, and it's something that I always look for in sales teams, actually, and this rippled right across this business, which is unconditional commitment to success of the client. They were totally customer centric, and their whole world was technically and commercially all about helping advance the customer. And I actually really liked that because the revenue and everything was important without question, because you've got to be commercially savvy, but equally it was that dedicated unconditional outlook. Again, it was the passion. Hopefully I'm answering the question, or have I?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's good. Yep. Yeah. Leading on from that, and that obviously leads nicely to my next question, is that during the last 4 to 5 months, many industries such as retail, travel, hospitality have gone through radical changes just to survive, never mind making a profit. A company like ours, who supply technologies and services to those, have seen a knock-on effect. How do you see us positioning our business to help those affected get back on their feet?
I think the absolute wonderful thing about Webtrends Optimize, we're a small niche business growing. And I think in these turbulent times, I think we stand for a good cause. I think if you look at the end of the day, we're all about, online efficiency, online performance, and results. And I think that if you're a retailer that's classic at the minute, that's looking to reach more of an online presence, then I think Webtrends Optimize is sat right at the heart of this right now. And, we're not a huge business that are suffering too much turbulence. We're actually on the precipice of growth. I mean, as a company, we're growing customers. And, John, it comes back to one of those fundamental questions you asked me at the get-go here. I look at companies and how long it takes to open up dialogue with customers and conclude business, because clearly there's got to be a commercial element to everything. And I'm seeing deals being won on a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly basis. So I think from that point of view, that gives me a good benchmark for growth. I think technically, from what I know, and I'm not a technical person, that we are advanced. So we can serve a market right now and support a market that is in turbulence if it's questioning, how it actually achieves more results and sustains those results. And I think that's the other thing is it's not about, one-offs, it's about sustainability. And I think Webtrends Optimize technically are an incredible partner in these times for organizations that are looking for more online presence, drive more performance and more results. And that's something that is, so in essence, we're a company that's kind of growing, small enough to care, big enough to deliver, that sort of message, but, growing. And I think if you look at comparables, if you look at the big giants, they're also going in the right direction. But I question whether you've got the right customer care when, for example, you're a public company, which comes back to one of the original questions, John. A lot of the companies in the early years, with EagerStream particularly, were public. Mm-hmm. So, the stock market had a big impact on infrastructure. And right now, so I think we're culturally in a good place. I think technically we're in a superior place. And, we're winning customers. So, the proof's in the results. So we're good.
In the next however long it takes to get to this, and I hate to use the phrase new normal, how do you think technology companies are going to fare in the next 2 to 3 years?
I think the tech industry at the minute is going through a significant shift without question. I think old world technologies, big clunky ERP systems, etc., supply chain, all the big, 9-10 month sales cycle organizations are probably challenged right now. I mean, they're driven on quarter by quarter results. They're serving the stock market. So the big conglomerates will be going through quite significant shifts. That said, there's a lot of new innovation coming. But if you look at it from a stock market perspective, we have an old world right now that's dying. And that's evident on a day-by-day basis with the results and the redundancies that's kicking in. But new world efficiencies are kicking in, and there's only one thing that's leading that storm, and that's technology. So I think businesses, major industry sectors are looking for quicker deployment, cloud-based services, easier to sort of firstly understand in a saturated tech industry. There is so much technology out there right now. I think for, CIOs particularly, it must be very challenging when selecting technology within their environment for strategic reasons. So I think it's a mix, but old out in with the new. So I think there's almost like an inflection point where some areas of the industry are actually struggling a little bit, but equally some areas are flourishing because of the deployment. And if we look at, it's not a particularly pleasant thing to say, but there is mass redundancies going on across the UK, particularly at the minute with some of our big household names, retail being one of them, obviously some of the big players in retail. There's only one solution, and that is we've got to get online, and we've got to survive the storm. So, the only thing that I would really feel for is the big elongated sales cycles, where you've got big expensive technologies wrapped up with corporate turbulence. I think boards of corporations right now are really challenged with getting winning strategies in a surviving market. So it's difficult. But equally, I think as time plays through, 2020-21 may be a lot fresher because we're adapting, and costs obviously and the likes have been now reshaped with offices being restructured, home working coming in as a fashion. It's also got its challenges. I don't know whether you know, John, but Schroeder's made that announcement that nobody's coming back to the office now. We're all home working. I think the city will take that trend So lots of moving parts, but out with the old, in with the new, faster deployments, easier to sort of financially structure. So cloud, software as a service, switch it on, switch it off. Everything that probably pre and post.com, 10 years ago was highlighted is now becoming the norm.
It's interesting you mentioned about the many thousands of people that have been made redundant, and that's obviously something which is devastating for those individuals. From a business perspective and looking to hire new individuals, maybe critical hires or whatever it might be, how do you suggest that we go through the deluge of CVs that arrive potentially for each role? Have you got a kind of a mechanics that says actually we can filter these out, or is it back to the kind of the old school of who you know?
That is an absolute fantastic evolutionary question. I think, firstly, if I can say that who you know has always worked, and I think won't go away without question. So I think networking from an employment point of view is key. But I think there's a new benchmark coming. And I think that if I was a CEO of a growing organisation now, I would be looking at multiple options of deploying skill and capability. So I think the word full-time is starting to sort of be quite special. I think full-time, part-time might start to kick in as businesses start to realign with, new skills to grow. I think one thing is coming is the death of the CV. I know personally that there is a deluge of talent within the industry at the minute on the market. But how visible that talent is another story, particularly if you're applying for a new job, because CVs do go on the stack, I'm afraid, and people at the other end who is filtering that stack have only got a certain amount of time, and if you find, you're shortlisted in a very short space of time, then so be it, and the rest will just have to be put to one side, and that's quite sad. However, I think what is becoming vogue is video CV. I think a lot of people will actually now need to think about their own personal brands and how they stand head and shoulders above or become more visible within their set domain. I think what will also become fashionable from an employer perspective will be domain experts that can come into an organisation for short periods of time and add significant value. So I coined the phrase cyber hours. I think people will be employed on hours versus days. So home working, cyber time, the condensing of value, I think that will come into fashion. The good news with that is it gives us more choice. It will give us more time in the sense that we'll have more free time to do what we want, or the whole world of work will completely over the next 2 to 3 years change, which I think has been a big prediction on the cards for quite some time, but has been in waiting, and I think COVID has actually accelerated that. But when you talk about COVID, I see it as one big global software upgrade. But that's a personal opinion, and I'm not fighting that battle. So
you might not be winning it either.
I don't think I am. Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about, and I'd like to know a little bit more about this full-time, part-time bit, because I can see that, there's over the years there's been this kind of you buy people per hour, or you get a technology specialist who might be a graphic designer that you spend 4 hours with him or something like that. But do you think that's going to be pervasive across the whole kind of employment industry?
I think for the majority of it, yes, I do. I speak for clearly the executive end of the market, because clearly it's the area of the market I know best. But I also can actually track back the dissatisfaction I've identified when I was assessing businesses and teams over the years on certain timelines, where people would have been happy to work 3 or 4 days a week or work contractually in a different way. But I think we all become conditioned to our habits and kind of working 5 days a week, has become the norm, and your standard sort of 4 8 weeks holiday, whatever that is. But I think
8 weeks. Matt, are you listening?
Yeah. Maybe not 8, but I do think the revolution of work is here without question. I mean, clearly, as you know, John, I've set up a business, Agility.life, with my co-founder Ben Rayner to support this, employment situation that's out there right now. But I genuinely think that if we take out the mediocrity out of the system of how we've been doing things, and I think, once again, but to use cover in anger with this situation right now, is I think that it is forcing employers to consider different ways of deploying skills and capabilities. So I think by accident and design, I think it's now coming. I think that, people will sort of look for new ways of actually deploying their skills and capability, not to sort of run from value. So just because you are possibly seen to be working less doesn't necessarily mean you get paid less. And often I think we equate time with money, and working long hours means long money. Then it doesn't. Those days of money being an antidepressant because you're slaving the system are kind of coming to an end. I think we've got different pressure now. I think it's more about more purpose-driven employment, more meaning in the work that we're actually delivering, and actually being recognised that from a value point of view. So I think the whole construct of employment and human delivery against those sort of challenges and objectives is changing.
So it's like the gig economy,
yes,
moving into technology companies.
Completely.
Yeah.
I think the gig economy stole a march a while ago, and I think it's going to become very trendy. I think it's very healthy. It's going to take a lot of courage because a lot of people aren't conditioned to it. A lot of people are conditioned to the sense of belonging, and there'll be a job there for me somewhere. I'm not sure. I think that there's a big change on the horizon, and I think that's starting to kick in as we speak. So it's a case of really preparing for that and digging deep and finding meaningful work, being purpose driven, and getting your brand out there to be able to be visible.
So just going back to one of the first questions that we asked, and one of your answers, it's saying that you deal almost exclusively with tech companies. In your experience with those companies, and I'm talking about from a sales perspective, because obviously you do help drive sales as part of your portfolio of solutions.
Yes.
What do you think are the primary reasons why many companies are reluctant to invest in technology?
Invest in technology?
Yeah.
I think sometimes it starts as fundamental as this. They don't quite know what they want, or whether they see the need, truly objectively. I think a lot of organisations don't realise that they can make their businesses and influence their businesses and their business strategies through real smart technologies. I think it's just bad practice in some ways. I think organisations really should be constantly looking to actually make improvements, and I think technology is a big enabler of that. I wouldn't say, there's a lot of apprehension out there right now, so if we bring it into a real-time scenario, I think there will be a lot of anticipation of what's coming human-wise, which will actually might defer technology decisions. So if we look at it from that perspective, right now, my observations over the last 4 months, you've got the business, you've got the corporation as an example, you've got that big name above the door, and then you've got the individuals. And often there's a blockage because it's not necessarily the company, it's the individual because of their circumstances personally. So sometimes, if, like I said, I think a bit earlier on with one of the questions was, if you're actually looking to win in a survival environment, it can be quite a challenge because you're actually having to look to streamline costs very quickly to stay alive, so to speak, but equally then make strategic decisions technically. It comes back to having good suppliers that are client-centric, which is why, I reinforce my engagement with Webtrends Optimize. They were 100% client-centric. That was very clear from the outset that they were genuinely here to solve a major problem within the industry. And I think that, if I was a buyer technically in a major corporation right now, learning to survive at one end and learning to win at the other, making wise decisions, particularly around, how we maybe reach online is smart. You've got to be putting those things in place. But it's like all things, what really does hinder progress with these turbulent times is fear. And I think that's a human condition that we have to try and overcome. So it may not be, the corporation, so to speak. It might be the individual that's actually feeling fearful and is holding up technology investment, as an example. But equally, I think that's why, from a sales perspective, you need to have the empathy with the client and being able to sort of advise appropriately from an objective perspective. So if there's a lot of indecision out there, which I call decision dysfunction, then often if you're a supplier in that situation, then I think you've got to apply the right level of empathy and help nurture the client to make wise decisions. So I'm trying to be optimistic about the question, because I think everybody should make decisions and continue to make decisions, but clearly not foolish decisions. So you have to be prudent and smart.
Moving on slightly on a slightly different tangent, a lot of the decisions with regard to selecting which technology is now made without any communication with the company that's providing that technology, only through web, looking through Google and making their selections. Does that mean, and I use this as a quote, the death of the salesman?
I think you might be a little bit right there, because it is a big subject at EagerStream at the minute, and it's an evolutionary subject. I mean, we're, as we speak, actually adapting our sales methodology in relation to these times. And you're quite right. The internet's providing a lot of information. There's a lot of technologies that you can, download and the likes. But I think I'm all about the human. I think it's all about. I think business, if we look at it from that perspective, from a human perspective, I think sales will start to evaporate slowly as a process as we know it today. But I think it will only adapt to become more intelligent, if that makes sense. So I think that salespeople aren't not intelligent. I'm not saying that. I think that salespeople are intelligent. There's some absolute fantastic businessmen out there that really understand their subject matter. But I think you need to be seen as a domain expert. I think that's what I'm really trying to say. And I think that once you are perceived as a domain expert, as an individual, there's always room for your advice, because you've got a very interesting perspective with an acute lens on the subject matter. So what I'm really trying to say is I think we will see sales modify in the way that we actually engage with our market technically. I think definitely there's always going to be the buyer that will buy from, but it'll all depend on the solution as well, without question. But I think smart CERs, smart IT directors, etc., leaders will want smart advice. And I think there lies, good business for me is all about good human, intelligent conversations that advise wisely and can actually guide clients to make good decisions. So I think the sales process definitely will be modified. I think people, you've got to anticipate that your buyer is more savvy than you think. And I think it's basically being more objective and more solution-minded, but equally more humanistic from a partnering point of view. I think that's very, very important right now. And I think from a buyer's perspective, then selecting good partners to work with, not to demand work for, is good business, because it's one of the things that always fascinated me from the early days of Webtrends Optimize was that advisory approach that they take with their customers, which means overall good purchasing decisions from a customer point of view, very good delivery, but open human conversation as well. So dare I say it, it's yes, I think the rise of the client advisor, it's well needed.
Paul, thank you very much for a great insight into our business. It's wonderful to be able to have that outside-in approach and for you to answer some pretty tricky questions at times. But thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure we'll speak soon.
Pleasure.
Thanks very much.